If you're a nonprofit CEO or executive director heading into a leadership transition, there's a version of leaving that looks responsible, feels generous, and quietly destroys the person who comes after you. It does not look like sabotage. It looks like loyalty. It looks like keeping an office, staying available, showing up to a few events, making sure the mission stays protective. It looks like care. I've been on every side of this. As the new leader who welcomed the old one back, as the one leaving who got it wrong, as the one who finally got it right, and as the board chair who shaped the exit. And what I've learned is this: the most dangerous ghost in the building is not the one who refuses to leave. It's the one who was invited to stay. Here's what that looks like from the inside and what changes when a leader decides to do it differently. Most leaders who are leaving believe that staying around puts people at ease, but it actually splits the room. Staff are not being disloyal. They are reading signals. When two leaders are both in the building, people start making quiet choices about whose voice matters. Donors do the same thing. They compare whether they realize it or not. And the new leader is almost always at a disadvantage because they're new and less familiar. The new leader never gets full authority because authority is not handed over in a memo. Authority grows when the new leader has room to make decisions without someone looking over their shoulders or second guessing them. And the person who just left takes up that room every single day just by being there. I experienced this firsthand. I had taken over a major organization, and the founder had negotiated a 1-year stay as a mentor. When I was younger, I thought that sounded like a gift, and I said so. So here I am, this new leader. I started listening and talking to staff, donors, and the board, asking questions, not giving answers. I approached it like I was a beginner, although I had been in that organization for quite a while and had risen through the ranks. My predecessor was in the room for some of those conversations, and he would cut in, finishing thoughts, adding background, shaping what people said when I was really trying to hear what they actually thought. Then when I came back with what I learned, he disagreed. Not with curiosity, not with interesting. How can we use that? Just disagreement. That was the moment I understood he did not think of it as my organization yet. And his being there made sure the people around me did not either. But that kind of confusion is only part of the problem. The harder truth is what the staying is really protecting. The common advice in leadership transition is that staying involved is the responsible thing to do. And that is exactly what makes it dangerous. Most leaders who stay genuinely believe they are protecting the mission. And that belief is exactly what makes them so hard to move on. There is a version of I want to help that is actually I'm not done grieving. And those two things look identical from the outside until the damage is done. In one of my early leadership roles, the person before me reacted very differently when I stopped calling him for advice. He got angry, not disappointed, angry, because what had looked like him saying, "I'm here if you need me," was actually him feeling, "I need to be needed." That's the mask coming off, and it's not unusual. It's almost predictable, because walking away from something you've built, you've invested your time, your energy, your competence in, walking away from that is a real loss. When there are no clear roles about how the person leaving remains involved, the transition almost always becomes harder than it needs to be. Not because anyone's trying to cause harm, because nobody defined the structure. And when the structure is missing, everyone pays. The person leaving, the person coming in, and the mission both care about. Knowing what goes wrong is one thing. What changes when an outgoing leader decides to do it differently is something that many people never get to see up close. By the way, if you are in this transition right now or heading into one, I put together a clean exit checklist. It's a framework I wish I had when I was getting it wrong. The link is in the description. There is a version of this that is not cold and not a betrayal of what you've built, but it requires being more specific than many leaders are willing to be. Later on in my career, when I was the one leaving and I was the founder who had built the organization, the new leader asked me to stay on as a consultant. So did the board chair. This time I had the experience and I used it. I agreed to stay, but only on terms that I defined. Short timelines, specific work assignments, clear lines around what I would do and what I would not do. I focused most on the handoff of donor relationships because often you can't do that any other way, but introducing the new leader as the person you have confidence in, and so does the board, and making that handoff very direct, personal, and confidently. I also said I wouldn't come into the building, and so people wouldn't see me, and everything would go through the new person. It was clear that he occupied the space and everything went through him directly, not around him. I also said I wouldn't talk to the board. The new leader should be the only one that board members called on. That is what a clean exit looks like. It is not staying away just to stay away. It's a structure that protects the new leader's authority. Now, let me be clear. It wasn't easy. There were times when things didn't work out like we had planned, but because we agreed on in the beginning and had expectations and understanding, we could always check ourselves and each other. Let me tell you, the most loving thing a departing leader can do is to create the conditions where they are no longer needed and then actually honor those conditions. That organization just called me back a few days ago to let me know they were celebrating their 25th anniversary. Organization's still standing. One of the reasons is because the succession transition was done right. That was one kind of clean exit. I've also served as interim executive on several occasions. I came in, did the work, found a permanent leader, then moved on completely. Different situation, same principle. The structure of how I stayed and how I left was defined from the beginning. Getting the departure right is one decision. But there is a conversation that has to happen before the departure. The agreement about how a leader leaves is almost always made too late, too loosely, or without enough detail so that the person coming in is protected. When I was in a board chair role, I shaped how the outgoing leader left. Those conversations are not just practical, they're about power. A board that wants the new leader to succeed will define the old leader's role clearly and then stick to it. Stay available is not a structure. It's an open door with no frame. When the new leader says, yes, please stay involved, they think they're being welcoming. What they're actually doing is agreeing to share authority. And that's a problem that will grow. When the outgoing leader and the new leader both agree to some kind of undefined arrangement, they're both making the same mistake. They're putting the person who's leaving their comfort ahead of the organization's health. If you're heading into a transition, the question is not, how can I stay involved? It is what specific time-limited role one the new leader can agree to can actually serve the organization. That is the harder question and the right one. There's one more place this shows up, and it has more to do with relationships than authority. What I know after being on every side of this issue is that the leaders who protect their legacy are the ones who create enough distance for the new leader to lead. The ghost in the building is not a villain, but they are a problem, and they're usually the last ones to see it. The organizations that make it through leadership transitions are the ones where the person leaving makes the harder choice, not the more comfortable one dressed up as caring for the mission. The mission you spent years building is worth one more hard decision. One of the most practical places this shows up is in your major donor relationships. Click the video on the screen and I'll walk you through exactly what happens to those relationships when you leave and what you can do about it right now.